All right, this is the music production course introductory class. And the idea of this is more or less to give an overview for what you guys will need to expect. Now, over the time, the last few weeks, there has been, not a lot of communication in terms of giving you guys exactly what I would need from you. And I think that's kind of a part of what all this is about. So I'd really want to structure this in such a way that everybody who participates is feeding me their work and whatever level it is, and then I will be giving you feedback accordingly. So this way, you will get something out of it, no matter what and what level that you want to participate in. So it's very difficult to structure the course in such a way where we start from a song and with nothing else and build it throughout. And of course, you are welcome absolutely to follow along in exactly that way. And I would love that and really embrace that and make that a featured part of the class if that was something that you wanted to do. But for all intents and purposes, it's not a practical reality in that just the scheduling, getting together with the people you need to record with, and finishing things from time to time. You may focus just on vocals, and sometimes vocals may take several weeks to get right, and that doesn't necessarily always fit into the format of the class. But I wanted to make sure that this is kind of, available, right, for all of you guys, and just to know that that door is open. So, as an all access member of the school, or as if you signed up for the music production course in particular, then you would be able to send me files directly through the email connection. That's the quick and fastest way to do it, which is just to reply to the newsletter and the online class announcements, and that gets back to me, and I see that and gauge that every day. So if you send me something, if it's a link through WeTransfer or Dropbox or The Box or any of those other you send it things, you could do it that way. If it's something bigger, I can do it in multi-track form if it's Pro Tools or Logic formatted. We could sort out the plugins and all of that sort of stuff. And I will be featuring some of that type of thing throughout the course. And also, you can send MP3s or WAV files, which would be preferable just for audio quality's sake. So, and that's gone along. And so I want to be able to also see the growth of things as well. So, I will kind of keep a line of the mixes or things that you send me as they kind of come along. So if you send me a production and it's in the early stages, I'll make some comments on it. You make some adjustments, some efforts in that line, and then send it back to me, and then we can compare and see what you've done by comparison to the last time. And so in a way, it's sort of like an executive producer from my perspective, but really helping to hone your own music production skills. And that's really the whole purpose of the course. So I think where we want to start here is just to kind of give an 8-week overview. So this has been more or less overhauled from what I had done before with the course, and I really want to kind of keep this a flow to the course that really embraces the modern production environment. Things are very, very different than they were decades ago when I started working on music. Things have changed. In the heart of the 80s and the 90s was much more of an age of specialization where a producer could be just a producer. That's all they could do, and they could do that 24/7. And songwriters could just be songwriters, and artists could just be artists, and engineers could just be engineers, and not only that, but just mix engineers. And while there is certainly a place for that, and it certainly does exist, in the real world today, there are people who are only producers or only this, but really more what you see are people who are crossing over. Like many of the producers that you see were artists, and they just happen to be very good at understanding how to structure songs and how to present them and produce them. And if they're successful, then that person takes those skills that they already have, and then they build on that, and they create a career or a secondary career. So they may be producing, and then they're making their own record, and then they're appearing as a guest artist on somebody's record, and then it kind of expands and grows. Okay, but it almost always starts from a strength. Today, what is necessary and the way that people are making music or becoming a quote unquote music producer is that really people are playing as many roles as possible. I can't tell you how many emails I get of people who say, why don't my mixes sound like, the songs I hear on the radio or my favorite songs? Why, what is it missing? And it's hard to explain sometimes that that every job, whether it's mixing, mastering, recording, producing, singing, beat writing, you could go on and on and on with all these individual roles, musicians of all different kinds of instruments. Those are all separate art forms in and of themselves. And the fact that you have the tools and the ability with just almost no money to be able to create music is incredible, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you're very good at it. And so, but you'll typically will have to build off of a strength to be really good at something, and that's really what I want to develop here. Okay, so just to kind of give an 8-week overview, and then I'll kind of focus in on each of these individual classes and what they're all about, so you really get a good broad understanding. And then at the end of this, I'll start to open up some of the material that you guys have already sent me, and talk about some new concepts and some things that I want to bring up here, that we'll bring in. So let's start by going over the 8-week course. So starting next week, the very first class will be on modern music production. So we'll really focus there on what music production is in the modern music environment. So understanding a little bit of the history of music production, how it's developed over the years, and where you fit into that. Then we'll get into starting a music production. So this is really, so we have a couple weeks here where we're really going to be starting off the process of creating music productions, and then the starting, understanding what the full process is, kind of an overview really of everything that's involved, and what a music producer's role is in all of this. Then it will get into evaluating the song and the artist. This is so important because probably the biggest mistakes that I see with young producers is that they'll write this really, really cool song and they'll match it up with the wrong artist. Or they'll take a really, really cool song from an artist and their production doesn't really match the skill set. So when you separate the production, you say, wow, this is a really cool musical production. And you separate the song, the lyric and the melody and the vocal, and you look at that and you say, wow, that's really cool, but they don't really go together, right? And so, and we'll really get into that because that's such a huge part. It defines the whole direction of how you're working, what you're doing, right? So you may have a song, if you're writing it, it'll have a certain meaning to you, right? It'll have a certain place, and it will probably, you will probably have the skill set to make that come across, right? Because you've written it, right? So it's coming from you, right? And you should know what your skills and capabilities are at that point. So if you're singing and you're writing the songs and building a production around that, that may be your strength. And then building the production and the music elements around it may be where you need the most amount of help. But understanding what your song really is about and how you develop the parts and the correct production that really supports it, that's really what we're going to get into the nuts and bolts of this, right? So then we'll really get into building a music production, the foundation of it, where you start, the role of all the individual parts that you use in the actual production itself, right? So that's really important. So we're actually building the production around the song. Now, there are different ways of going about this because some songs start with music and then lyrics or rap or whatever is written on it, or maybe it's just electronic music and it's mostly samples that sort of take that place of interest, in terms of what you're really focusing on, or other musical instruments. So there is something a process for both. Okay, so you may start with lyrics first and a melody and then build a production around that, or you may start with music and then you build a song around that in terms of lyrics and music, or you may just have music and build around that. So then there's also remixing, right, which is taking the existing material of other people and resampling and working with that, and that's a whole other process, and we're really going to dig into some of that stuff as well, right? Now, Probably the most important part of this is number 5, or week number 5, which is overcoming problems. Because every production, right, and any of you guys who have spent any time at all writing songs or producing or creating, you know that you will run into certain obstacles. And sometimes they're always the same obstacles that you run into. And this is really, really, I mean, so important because realizing what those problems are and how you address them is the way that you get done. Like common problems are things just dragging on forever. So maybe you're collaborating with people, and one of the biggest things I see is that people they're busy, their lives, and it's like a production drags on for 6 months, right? And it's something that you wanted to finish in a couple weeks, right? So that's really big, 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 right? With all of this. So other problems are conflicts with other people. Maybe that you have a stylistic direction, right? Or, other problems are is the production is just not working. And sometimes having the guts to just say, screw it, we're going to start over again, scrap this, it isn't working, right? For whatever reason, and rebuilding it, right? So that's like a really critical section there, overcoming problems, right? And then we'll get into recording and editing work. And this is these next 2 weeks are really about collaborating with other people, and particularly this week. So when you're recording an artist, how you produce them, okay? So it may be that you're doing all of the recording work yourself, right? You're actually doing all of the production work, song selection, recording yourself. You may be doing everything, and producing yourself. So, I guess you could have two different outfits and a hat that you flip backwards or something, like a baseball hat that's forward when you're a producer and backwards when you're the artist. And you just, you run over to the producer's chair and you yell at yourself, and then you go back behind the microphone and you look really sad and despondent or whatever, and then, you say, oh, you need to do this, and then, but you could do that. But this is really more about when you're working with other people, right? So when you're actually, you're actually working with another person who has ideas. They have certain abilities, right? Capabilities. They have certain issues, right? Personal issues, right? Maybe they get really you know uh, uptight when they get behind the microphone and they don't really express themselves. So how do you get that expressive energy out of them? How do you get them into their creative space, right? And that's really like a key thing. And collaborating with other people, it's such an important part. And then the mixing and mastering process. And this is so important because a song can really be come to life almost out of nothing, or it can really be completely destroyed by the mix, right? So, and this is such an important part because this really weaves the whole song together and completes the picture that you're trying to create, right? So this is like a big part. And then finally, and I had debated with myself for a while about putting this in, and I really wanted to do this, and that is selling your production work, and not just your production work, but yourself as a producer. And the one thing that I've included in every section of this is a section I call the BIZ of MP, right? Which is the business of music production. So there is a business element and business lessons within each one of the 8 weeks. And the last one would be almost entirely focused on that because it's so important. So each week will have, as part of it, a lesson that's as closely associated with the subject matter of that particular week as possible, right? And from there, then you can kind of build the whole production, right? You have to kind of think about it from an overview perspective, right? A producer's role is more than just the minutia of things, right? Just all the very fine tuning. It's also zooming out and seeing the whole forest, not just the individual trees, and looking at it and saying, okay, now looking at it from an outside perspective, do I care about this production, right? Does it matter? Is this really good? And that's not an easy skill to learn, right? It's not an easy skill to learn. But if you can learn that, it is tremendously powerful in helping you to achieve the things that you want to achieve in terms of your music production work. So the music production course, the way I've structured it, is a combination of not just technical skills, right? and there is plenty of that, but also business skills and understanding that side of it. Everything has a purpose and everything has a role, and it's not possible in 8 weeks to get into everything. Like I could make a whole course just about beat writing, right? And you could do like a whole thing on that. So that's not going to be important here, but we will talk about the important aspects of what you're looking for in terms of a groove and the different elements of a groove and which one is appropriate for the type of music. So, from a producer's role, this is really looking at or taking the perspective of the song as a product, as a whole, and that includes the artist, right? Packaged all together. That's what a producer does. A producer realizes a vision for the artist, right? And a vision for the song. And that vision has to come across in such a way that when people listen, they will get it. And they will want to listen to it, and they'll want to listen to it over and over again. Okay, and that's great, and that's important, and that's why I put the end section in there, which is selling the production, because if nobody hears it, if it doesn't get out to anybody, then it's meaningless, right? And that's like, there's a saying that goes like money talks and BS walks, right? That's like the basic idea, right? So, and ultimately, that's very true in terms of your music production work or as a music producer. Are you creating things that people are buying, right? That people are into, that are becoming successful, right? That are getting out there, that people are seeing? Because when you do that, then you get in demand. Then you're not just a story about how amazing and how talented you are, but you got something that backs it up, right? And so that's really where I want you guys. So, in working privately with students, and part of the design of this course can be attended in two ways, where you can take private lessons along with the course materials, or you can take the course materials on their own. And what I found in working with people privately in this way, working with them as independent producers, is that once you kind of develop the proper mindset and the skills, the opportunities just start coming up out of nowhere. It's actually, one of the biggest problems I have with private students that I have is keeping them. And not because, not to blow my own horn here, but not because, what I do sucks. It's because actually when they listen to me and they start doing what I tell them to do, they actually start getting work and they start getting opportunities, and then they start really really learning, and the only way that you really can learn, which is by doing it, right? So it's just, in some ways it may be forcing their hand to get out there and go make those connections that they're afraid to make, and when they go out and they start making those connections and they get their opportunities, whether it goes well or bad or poorly, they learn something, and from that you grow, right? I think as a producer and engineer and developing my own personal career, I think the most valuable lesson I learned over that time was to look, not just to focus on what I did well, but to focus on what I could do better the next time, right? So what am I weakest at? What was the thing that didn't go well, that could have gone better, and how can I make that be better the next time I go about doing it? And so this is the whole thing. And I think when I first put on this music production course 8 months ago, I don't think I had the whole package of it put together the way that I really wanted to. And I think this course now has all of those missing elements that kind of tie it in together. And all of those materials are really valuable, and I will be showing you those materials, and we'll get into all that stuff. So, but this is the basic overview now, and now let's get into some of the individual things or elements of the course.